Hi, everybody. I'm just, hello. I think I'm live now. Let's see. My glasses on so I can see a little bit better. Hello, hello. Let's see. Let me close a couple things down here so that everything is rolling well. Let's not close. Let's close this down. Close that down. There we go. Always good things to do is to close down some stuff, huh? Hello, Patsy and Jen and Christina and Adjure. Is it Adjure? Adjure could be how you say it. Let me turn off my phone. Oh, hold the line. I left my tea right there. 1 second. Sorry, folks, I left my tea. I'm actually obsessed right now. Here's the newest obsession. This is an old obsession in a new form. So this is Hardy & Sons, and it is the hot cinnamon spice, but it normally comes in a tin, which I have. It normally comes in a tin that is more along the lines of like a loose leaf tea. It's in triangle bags with sort of a loose leaf in it, and it's really strong. It's like drinking Red Hots in a teacup. And it's delicious, but you can only leave the tea bag in for so long because it gets so strong. So this is the same exact stuff, but it is in regular tea bags. My friend, she's been my friend for like 20 years, and she knows my tea loves. And she sent me this box because she found it in box format like this, in regular fine ground tea like you would have in a regular tea bag. And it's delicious. It's not as strong. So there's a time in which the other one would be wonderful, but you can drink on it, you know, the whole thing, leave the tea bag in. It's really delicious. Perfect for this time of year. So if you're looking for a tea that is cinnamony and spicy, then I highly recommend this. And she found this box on Amazon. So I know you can get it on Amazon because I can't speak. So anyways, there you go. Let me stir my sugar. Of course, I would say it's best used with sugar in the raw, because sugar, I use sugar in the raw, which is like raw sugar that hasn't been refined. It's not white. It's like mapley color, because they haven't bleached it or processed it in any way. And the sugar in the raw has a slight molasses or maple or molassesy kind of flavor, just very slight, but it's amazing, especially in this kind of tea. So there, those two things together make a perfect combination of tea. So hello to everybody. I see a Kaylee. Is there somebody tell me how to say hi? There's Misty. Ajur. I don't know if Ajur ever said if I was saying his name correct or not. Molasses. Hello, Rachel and Terry. So we're back. Clearly, we're back. On a Sunday. You know, it's good to try Sundays sometimes. It's okay. I actually had my first Tales in the Woods class yesterday, which was so much fun because it's more like a lit class, and I feel like I'm going back to my roots. And so that was a lot of fun. But I decided I was gonna actually put my Christmas tree up yesterday, but I didn't get around to it. But so anyways, I decided it's just easier to switch it to Sunday, and here we are. Sometimes people love it because there's other people who can make it on Sundays that can't make it on Saturdays. So, you know, it all works itself out. Good morning to New Zealand. Probably pretty early morning, huh? I can call a Kelly B. Well, hello, B. I will try to remember that. I have a brain of a sieve sometimes. Your Christmas tree went up today, Patsy. I have, my niece hers goes up on November 1st. Usually I'm a big fan of putting my Christmas tree up on Thanksgiving night. So the day of Thanksgiving, that night is usually when I put up my Christmas tree. But I did have a bit of an urge to get it done a little bit earlier this time, but maybe not, because Thanksgiving isn't this week, but next week. So I don't think I'm going to make it to Thanksgiving before putting my tree up. So, oh no, Sherry just whacked herself in the face with her headphones. Oh no, I'm sorry. I figured I probably didn't. Is it just a door? Maybe a door? I try. You can maybe try to phonetically tell me how to say it, but I'll probably still mess it up, but I apologize. Hello, Tara student. My giving tree is up. Everything is handmade by me, all for giving. Oh, that's fantastic. I bet it's gorgeous. Patsy's a week earlier. I don't know about you. I know we're supposed to be talking about ghosts, and we will. I am not, I take mine down Christmas Day usually, truthfully. The Christmas Day night, it generally is, I take it down. So I do like it to be up a little bit earlier. I don't like to wait into December because I do like to enjoy it. But I have a very small apartment, and so a tree, even if it's a smaller tree, it's still taking up space. So I'm usually very ready after that at Christmas to take it down. So it works. It all works out. Christmas, so tree goes up. Wendy hates Christmas, or somebody hates Christmas. So tree goes up 12 days before Christmas and comes down 12 days after. Well, I mean, that's still 24 days. So it's still a nice amount. Oh, okay. Bid would be hubby. I'm like, I'm not sure who Bid is, but he does not like Christmas. Holly is in an apartment too, so I use a table tree. I do have a full tree because I do love a tree, but I don't do a lot of other stuff where I know a lot of people do tons of decorating. I don't. It's pretty much confined to the tree. I have a smart plug that normally this light goes into so that I can say, Alexa, turn on all the lights or whatever I'm going to say. I can't say it or she'll probably turn it off right now. And I'm going to put that plug over onto my Christmas tree. And I'm going to set it up in my Alexa so that when I say, Alexa, turn on the Christmas tree, it will turn on the Christmas tree and start playing Christmas carols. That's my plan. That's my excited plan because I'm 5 years old. We used to have a cat. His name was Lucky, and he would run up the tree, up like at the base where the trunk would be. He would run up the tree and then jump out the tree and pull everything with it. Mine are very woodland style too as well, Holly. Love, Light, and Peace says hello, and I say hello back. I know I miss people. Somebody's making spider. Oh, Claire said if I were to put up my tree now, the spiders would be very happy. Spiders being happy is a good thing, unless they're jumping on you or something. Oh no, Claire has a cat. Get ready. They sure do love Christmas trees and the bulbs. Isabel was pretty good. When she was a baby, I had a little bit of a problem with her. Where I just had to be careful that the very bottom row did not have Christmas bulbs on it because she played with those, but she's never been too bad with it. She's interested in it, but she was never too terrible. Will I be doing a Christmas live? Yes, we will definitely be doing a Christmas carol of some sort because that was so much fun. Although I'm thinking of doing it on Zoom, which I'll put up a link for in some way, just so that people don't have to actually send me their recordings. They can just turn on their microphones and sing their Christmas songs. I don't know. I'm working out how to make that work. There's also something else that my friend Bart found that would allow me to pull pull people in a little bit better than Google Hangouts used to do. So I'm playing around with it, but we will definitely be having a Christmas Carol live. Not necessarily on Christmas Day, but we will have a Christmas Carol live. Motions activated figures that dance and sing used to guard my mother's Christmas tree. Oh, so that would throw the my phone is just, I'll make sure. Okay. It's like bzz, 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 bzz. I'm like, what is going on here? The cat was afraid of that. That's a good idea. It would start coming on towards the tree and have something motion activate and scares them. Oh no. Wendy says, on our estate, when the first house puts on decorations outside the house, the fun starts as the others try to outdo. Oh, don't you love that? I love to go to neighborhoods where you can tell that this has happened. That sort of, okay, well, people have stuff up, so it is time, right? It's so fun to see, and it's wonderful to be able to, for the other people to be able to drive through and see them. I'm not sure how we're going to segue from Christmas to our topic of the day, which is ghosts and spirits. But I think we can do it. Let's talk about Scrooge, right? And we can talk about the ghosts of Christmas past. Of course, that works to get us there, to the ghost that came forward to try to mend Scrooge of his ways. The spirit of Christmas past, exactly, Holly. That will segue us. So if you were here last Saturday, we had a little bit of a chaotic first hour because I say we as if I'm going to try to allow you, the rest of you, to take some of the blame. I tried to bite off too big of a topic, and it got to be a little crazy trying to separate out the different topics that we were talking about, and it was way too much. And for one for 1 hour chit chat. So, but it was interesting conversation. So we wanted to sort of break those pieces apart and revisit them, but with a bit of focus on individual topics. So we are this week going to solidify this down into just talk, because we talked about what is the soul, like what is the makeup of the human, like it's a body, soul, and spirit, body, mind, and this. We talked about out of body experiences, near death experiences, ghosts and spirits. Like it was just way too much conversation for 1 hour chat. So we're going to break it down, and this week we're just going to talk about ghosts and spirits. What do we think? Do we believe in ghosts and spirits? What do we think ghosts and spirits are? How do we interact with them? Do we not interact with them? What do we feel about the liminal space, right? Because that's one of the things that's interesting about whatever you may see ghosts and spirits as, is they certainly occupy a liminal space, right? They occupy that space that's between. They're neither fully dead and don't exist or off onto the other thing that they're supposed to be up to, nor are they fully alive, but instead they're in this in-between space that I'm sure must be rather uncomfortable if you are a ghost or a spirit. Hello, Miss Jamie Lynn. So as we do with these things, and some of this is going to be obviously repeat from last week, but we're going to dive into this a little bit, deeper. But so you're going to hear some repeats. I definitely believe in. I don't know what I prefer to call them, probably spirits. I don't know. I do believe in spirits. I do believe that there are things in liminal spaces. I do believe that the body has a soul or a spirit that exists outside of the physical body. I do believe in reincarnation, which means I do believe that at some point after death, a soul is going to move on into another life, but that doesn't happen immediately. It may or it may not happen immediately, depending on the person and the person's need, perhaps for a lull and a break between, a breather for a minute, or whatever that may be. So I don't think of it as instantaneous. So Christianity in the form that I was raised in has the absent with the body, present with the Lord. So at the moment of death, you either go to heaven or you go to hell, or you go to heaven or you go to purgatory, depending on which persuasion of Christianity you are. But when you die, your spirit goes to another place instantly. Whereas because I am again, believe in reincarnation, I don't necessarily feel that that has to happen instantaneously. And I also don't think that time functions the same way outside of this physical world, as, you know, it's not, the time doesn't going to function in the same manner. So given those things that I do believe, I 100% do believe in ghosts and spirits and that type of thing occurring. Now, I do believe, I think purgatory is hell or just a limbo? Cherie, that would be a whole nother conversation about what we believe about heaven or hell. My understanding of purgatory from a Catholic sense is that purgatory isn't hell as the same as a Protestant sense. So hell is a place of punishment in Christianity of a Protestant form. So you either have been saved and done the right things and gone to heaven, or you haven't and you go to hell. Whereas my understanding of purgatory is more of a limbo where people can, like my aunt who is very Irish Catholic, she paid for lots of masses for my soul, because I was the first girl in my Irish lineage for quite some time since her, and she was my great aunt. And so she paid for lots of masses for me so that when I did go to purgatory, I would be able to get out of purgatory faster. However, I am not an expert on purgatory, and that's a whole nother different conversation, although an interesting one. So coming back to this though, because of the way that I believe primarily what people see when they see ghosts, right? So when you say, oh, this house is haunted, or you watch a show where it's like, okay, you know, go visit this hotel because if you go to this hotel, we always see this white lady, and she comes out of the room and she goes across the hallway and she goes down the stairs and then she disappears into the ether, right? It's this, that type of thing. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I talked about this last time, but I do believe that a lot of things that people see as ghosts are just that. They're recordings, basically, that because of a particular place, whether it has an intense amount of energy at a place that is going to hold these types of things better, or whether it is a traumatic event or a really, really, really happy event, because it's not always negative. It captures a signal, just like we have radio signals and television signals and all kinds of signals bouncing around in the air. It captures a signal, and it just is, we're seeing it like watching a video recording back. So we're watching the same thing that happens over and over again, and it is, there's not, in my opinion, those, and I've seen those before, and in my opinion, those aren't actual souls or spirits that are trapped. It's just a recording that's playing over and over again. I don't know if there's a specific meaning of the term imprint, but yes, it would be like an energetic imprint. And so we're not actually seeing somebody's spirit or soul that is just, stuck in this pattern. It's a recording. It's an imprint. It's something that we're watching that doesn't have a soul inhabiting it. I've seen those before, and I don't get any sense, in my opinion, of anything being there other than a recording. So there's that kind, right? Then there's also obviously souls that are maybe stuck in between, which is also something that I've experienced quite a lot of. And those, in my personal experience, have always just been people who are confused. So whether they died quickly, whether they died unexpectedly, whether they had a lot of unfinished business and just weren't prepared for it, but something occurred in which for whatever amount of time they're just kind of a little bit confused. And my experience, they tend to look confused, they tend to be crying, or maybe even look a little bit frightened, just as like what's happening. That's something, that's an energy I think to have a great deal of compassion for. And I have learned in the past just to do loving kindness to them and kind of wish them well, and let them, go about their way, because it's just a momentary, hopefully momentary, confusion where they get stuck in this space between because they're confused. So that's another experience that I've had with them. And then of course there are, as I see some people, I'm trying to, as always, kind of stay on topic to get out. Then I'll start looking at the chat. Otherwise I'll get way off track. Obviously I also believe that loved ones and people that have passed on before us, including ancestors, but that's like a whole nother chat, but can obviously come to us in various ways to leave messages, oftentimes through dreams, sometimes through physical happenstances like birds and bird feathers, for me and my son, sometimes through getting our attention by knocking over portraits and things of that nature, just as a kind of, hey there, hello. That is certainly another form of connection with a spirit that is gone, obviously not in the physical world. So I think I'm trying to think if I've hit on all of the, and then of course you have what you see in like a lot of horror movies and things like that with poltergeist type things and things flying around and real negative energy there. So you would have those. I don't have a lot of experience with that in what I would call spirits, more negative energy than an actual person. So I don't have a lot of experience with ghosts as being angry versus just like negative energy, which could be two different things. Okay, now, so that's kind of what we're talking about in terms of spirits and whether we believe in that, whether we have had experience with that, what we think about that. That's kind of our conversation for the day. Sherry says, I've had doors and cabinets opening and closing, toilets flushing, things coming on. The weirdest was electrical things coming on that weren't plugged in. Yes, L, just sugar in the raw. Claire says, my brother came to me. He just looked at me and then faded away. Christina must have somebody because, she's had experience more with an angry ghost. Leslie says, I think when an ancestor comes to you in a dream that, yes, I definitely agree with you on that, Leslie. Holly says her mom's ghost is the only one she's seen. Sleeping or awake, because that's always interesting. I've definitely had a lot in dreams, both my sons, uncles, people that have passed on, conversations and things like that. I'm trying to scroll back up here for a second. I think somebody, oh yeah, Sherry, that's terrible about your child. Rachel says, I'm an evidential medium. I'd be curious to see what the evidential part of that means. I mean, I've heard of mediums, obviously, but I've not heard of an evidential medium, so that's interesting. Yeah. give your loved one 3 months or before tuning in. I definitely agree. People have, because I've obviously had a son pass on, and I have talked about this in videos, I will say that I have unfortunately been approached by a lot of people saying that they would have messages, not all for nefarious reasons for sure. But sometimes it feels, I think it always, I would say in some ways, even when I know that it's with good intent, it always does feel very invasive. And it has, my personal suggestion is to anybody like that, or who feels the need to reach out to somebody in that manner. My personal advice is probably to not, to accept that loved one will probably find a way to give a message to them their own self. It can be, feel very invasive of privacy to have somebody do that. But on the other hand, I can understand that if you do feel as if you have a message from somebody's loved one, that it's probably difficult to not want to comply with that and bring that up. So that, I think that's a very touchy thing when you're starting to approach unasked. Again, if somebody comes to you, that's a whole nother ball game. But if the person hasn't requested of you to interact in that way, I do think it's very sensitive topic, and I would certainly approach. I guess the best way I would approach it would be, I might have a message from so-and-so. If you want to receive that, let me know, versus just maybe dumping it on somebody. Although to me, a little bit of that is also still somewhat invasive, just in the terms of, it's a very private thing, and people are at all different stages of grief. And so they may not be in that position of wanting to have that interaction with a stranger. So I do think that it kind of we cross into a little bit, but a lot of people ask me, like, do I try to contact my son or things of that nature? And I tend to know. We have communications. He's certainly communicated with me through dreams and other forms, and I kind of allow those to have their natural progression, because obviously as his mother, I really do want him to just go about the business of, living whatever life he is living right now without being kind of pulled back by perhaps my grief or things that I have to work through. So I'm usually quite careful about those kinds of things, because that's my own personal beliefs there. So I think the key would be in all these, when we're starting to talk less about, oh, this is this haunted house over here, and we're talking more about people who have family members and loved ones that have passed away. I think that a degree of compassion and a degree of personal boundaries is something that is always going to be a good thing to have in place. I asked my dad to let me know where I sleepy when he's leaving this life, and he did. He woke me up one night and let me know he's okay and had a ride. See, that's amazing, Patsy. I'm so glad you had that experience. I'm going to scroll up here a little bit. The house I grew up in had quite a bit of poltergeist type activity. Actually, I need his help because his strong presence, but I don't want him peering over my shoulder. Every little thing else says. I know her father has recently passed away, but she probably already, I know she already said, yes, there she said it. 96, he would have been 96 yesterday. Strong presence, so I know, right? You want them to be hanging around, but you don't want to be creeped out by them hanging around too much, right? Hanaconda grew up in an old plantation house, and I remember seeing disembodied arms and etc. through the walls. That would be scary. That would definitely be terrifying. I do think, and this is the other thing that we could talk about too, right? because I do sometimes think that, you know, I believe that places hold a lot of residual memory, right? So, you know, we talked about this a little bit with animism, the idea of animism, that everything has soul and everything has spirit. And even things that are built rather than grown, right? So say a house or something that we talked about, spirits of the river, spirits of trees, things of that nature. And then people might come and leaving offerings and blessings. And of course, that would go stronger over time. But if we think about a house, right, especially some of these older houses, this is made out of everything that's in the world, whether it looks modern or it looks old, is made out of components from our natural world. And so after, you know, after a time of lifetimes and lifetimes of people being born and people dying and people living out their lives, the best parts of their lives, the worst parts of their lives, all of this, in my opinion, just seeps into the bones of a house and a place. And so I do think that houses themselves don't necessarily, and this, I guess, my differentiation is that I don't think it's always that there are spirits trapped in a particular house or manifesting in a particular house, but that sometimes the house itself has held on to residual memories and has residual things that just come, if you're of the type of mind that can see them, right, then all of these things are going to be very disconcerting, and very, you know, kind of all over the place and pretty creepy and scary to have happen. So it's interesting because I think that's another way to look at spirit, that it isn't just necessarily ghosts, as in people's spirits that have passed over, but also the memories of old places, which I think is really cool, actually. The day before my dad passed, he had fallen asleep in the afternoon. When he woke up, he told me he had dreamt a close family friend who had died years ago stood near and said he was coming to meet him tomorrow. How amazing is that, Wendy, though? I think that's so amazing that your dad had that experience and that knowing that somebody was going to be meeting them. I do think that's really fantastic. I find what follows me through the forest is much smaller and multiple, like dragonflies and moths, but not. That's another conversation. I try not to jump into the midst of conversations that I have no idea. My mom would say, "Don't go to the cemetery because she won't be there." Yeah. No, I don't think that that's morbid. I don't generally believe that ghosts hang around cemeteries. Although again, think about a cemetery. You have and some of them are old, different types of, you know, how long there have been people here. But if you think about all of the people's lives that have passed through a cemetery, both the actual person who's passed away, as well as all of the, you know, not troops, but, you know, that influxing of grieving people, because no matter, you know, how the loss might have occurred, there's still somebody who's left behind and they're going to be sad no matter what. And so if you have a cemetery that is just full of that energy, so now in a cemetery, I think you actually have a crossing of two things. You know, souls that might be, you know, have some degree of attachment to their physical form, but then you also have that spirit of place where over time and so much emotion concentrated in one piece of land, that necessarily has to be a very powerful space, in my opinion. Very interesting. Sherry says, ours is old and my family is all buried there. That's powerful. I used to go regularly for my husband until the graves were banned. Oh, that's so terrible. That's so terrible, Sherry. I just can't even, I know people do it, but I think it's just amazing to me, in not the best way at all of amazing, that that people would vandalize a graveyard. It's just terrible. I think that Al's talking about houses. Have been wanting to read Claude, I don't know how to say his last name, Demons and Spirits of the Land, Ancestral Lore and Practices. I have not read it before, nor heard of it, but I'm going to try to. Why is Handaconda? Hello, Molly. Why is Handaconda not showing up as a, let's see, I'm going to first, no, it won't let me do it. The chat's a little bit different. Something seems a little bit off with the chat. Let's see, just a minute. Just a minute. Oh. I'm trying to get a hold of Such. So there we go. Okay. Oh, you switched to live chat? Let me see. No, it's not even letting me change live chat. So there's sometimes there's different kinds of chats, and mine isn't letting me actually change that. Oh, okay, Hanaconda, there you are. I'm like, something is not right with this chat. Okay, I'm gonna quit being distracted by it. It is what it is. I can't even change the chat. There's top chat, live chat, but it's not even letting me change it. Okay. What is Al says, what is the difference between live chat and top chat? One of them you see everything, and I think one of them tries to filter out potential spam, I believe. And I now I can't remember which one is which, because it's not letting me in this format, it's not letting me change it. So I'm yeah, I'm not sure which is which, unfortunately. Claude is amazing, but I haven't read that one. I've read Dwarves and Elves in the Middle Ages, where he suggests that elves are spirits of the dead. There is a lot. We talked a little bit about this in my class, because we were talking about fairy tales. There's definitely, when the further back you go in stories of fairies and elves and things, there is definitely a crossover where there are spirit, were elves, connection with ancestors and family spirits that have passed on. So there's definitely a cross, a blending between those two the further that you go back, which is actually really interesting. So yeah, so that makes sense to me. Adore. Nikki's probably, yeah, she's not, I haven't seen her yet. We're on Sunday versus Saturday, so we've definitely probably thrown things off for some people that aren't able to catch up. Apparently he also has a book on the Wild Hunt. Yeah, I'll have to definitely look him up. Somebody explained which was which with the live chat, and I can't find it. Whale Song believes that the live chat shows everything. That makes sense to me, but I have no clue. She sometimes is both, Al, but sometimes people do have things to do, right? I know we are horrified by the thought that people might have something other to do than live chatting about ghosts and spirits, but okay, what did Miss Molly say? I almost bought a house at the end of a cemetery, but the house needed a lot of work before it could be lived in. Did you get any kind of weird feelings? Or not weird as in bad, but weird as in kind of any vibe feeling to the space, or did it feel really nice and clean? I'll be interested to hear that. Talking about ghosts and spirits, my grandma visited a lot just after she died, but she's always laughing. And she has no idea why, Dita says. Like laughing in a good way, or feeling like she's laughing at you, like, oh, you poor thing. Now that I know what's after, what comes next, I feel bad for you stuck behind. Like, what kind of thing was, how was the laughter being taken? That makes sense to me, Duda. Both as a grandmother and just as a grandmother who's passed on, right? You just get that sense that they're like, oh, come on. Don't worry so much. Don't worry so much, right? Holly says, do I have the Stolen Child Tarot? No, I do not. I didn't catch on to that one till either at the end of the Kickstarter, or I saw it before all the cards were done. I really do. Oh my gosh, Belle just snored so loud. Maybe all the cards weren't done and then I ended up missing it. I do prefer to see all the cards of a deck, and so sometimes I miss out on Kickstarters as I'm waiting for all the art to be finished. She says, when I was looking for a condo, I looked at one that was actually an old church. Too cool. No doubt there were spirits there. The only reason I would buy a house near a cemetery is because of the toxic soil. The only reason I would buy a house near a cemetery is because of the toxic soil concern. I think maybe she was saying that the only reason she wouldn't buy a house, is my guess, is because of that. Molly says, my dad knew the owners, but the house needed a lot of money and money work, and we needed a house we could live in while we DIY. That makes sense. But Molly did want to live at the end of I thought that's what you're saying. It didn't make sense otherwise. Al says, I moved into a house that a woman had lived in all her life. She passed away at quite an advanced age. Was there late one night cleaning, and I looked up and she was there in a dingy pink robe. Just there. So then that would be the question: is did it seem just like a residual memory of the house, or did it seem more like she was looking at you and more interactive, which is interesting. This is the best tea ever, folks. Seriously, if you missed the beginning, this is not sponsored. I wish Hanley and Sons would sponsor me. I have no sponsors, so I don't know why I'm saying that. But if I did, I would like it to be. But really, if you're looking for a good tea, try this tea, because it is so good. I can't even tell you. She was really pissed off. Oh no, Elle. She was like, look, no, you're in my space. I thought in-ground burials had crypts. Can they be I don't know if that's the case though with older cemeteries, Claire. I know that a lot of times there is like a concrete box that the coffin is put into, but I don't know that that's necessarily the case with older cemeteries, because they probably didn't used to be. I don't know when those started to become maybe where it is required. So I think that cemeteries probably have a mix of those things, but I know nothing of this, so don't take don't take what I say about this as anything. People are under the delusion that the embalming process removes the toxicity. You could really feel something in the house of the family home. I think, there's lots of conversations. I love the conversations that go on, but then I'm kind of trying to see, okay, is this one we can dive into? Elle said, she was looking all grumpy. I told her she was dead, but we had to do a complete space clearing. Oh no, she was a very mean kindergarten teacher. Oh, I'm glad you were able to clear it. I must be the strange one here. One of my hobbies as a teen was going to older cemeteries and make charcoal. I did that too, Terry. I actually did love I've always loved cemeteries. I should say, I've never had a negative feeling going to a cemetery, but I've always been very respectful about it. I've always felt very much at peace there. And so I have definitely done rubbings and done them in a lot of different places in Boston, and I love old cemeteries, and I've never had a negative experience in a cemetery. I've always found it to be very, very peaceful. I have gone before to cemeteries just to sit and have lunch and take a breath. Again, with great respect, and I've never had a bad experience there. It's always been very relaxing and very peaceful to me. In fact, I had one date. I've been on very few dates, like actual, like getting to know somebody dates in my life, because I married my high school sweetheart. He lived next door. We were married for 23 years. But there was a 2-year period where we were broke up, and I was talked into going on a date with, I think my best friend needed somebody to, go along. It had to be a double. She couldn't go on a single date. She could only go on a double date. And I was talked into going on a date with this one guy. No, that was pizza place. Anyways, I ended up going to a cemetery as a date with somebody that I didn't know. This was like, I felt like that was a safe place to do and relaxing. I don't think they were super impressed with that. We didn't have a second date. It was probably because I suggested going to a cemetery. Terry. Let's see. We used to pass the cemetery all the time to get my friend's house. It was never scary. Yeah. Patsy says, my daughter was in the bath one night. She was about 11, screamed something had bitten her there, as no one was there, but she had a bite. Oh, yeah. See, that starts to get into, yeah, that's to me. Yeah. Then that starts to get into the more creepy stuff. I have never, I will say for the record, I have seen a lot of things, some things that I'm, not overly interested in having a conversation about as of right now. So some more like some more scary, energetic things. But I've seen a lot of things, but I have never been in an experience in which I thought I was in any kind of danger, physically in any kind of danger. So I definitely don't have a lot of experience with a lot of scary things, but not like physically like that. So I'm definitely not an expert on that topic for sure. My strongest experience was Time says, my strongest experience was a woman who died in my room before I moved in. She threw things at a flatmate. Oh no. Oh, Cemetery Annie was Sherry, I love you so much. You're hilarious. Hello, Anna Teresa. We're talking about ghosts and spirits. I've had experience with spirits too, something that was never human. It shook my bed in college money. Yeah, see, that starts to get into, I feel like a lot of those things are, then now we're starting to talk about other things, other kind of scary spirits and other supernatural things, which is outside of the scope of this conversation. I've heard it can be hard to sell a house that gets a reputation. Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm with Sherry. We're not going to go there, at least not in this conversation. I don't know if we'll ever go in that conversation. I do have some holdovers from being a fundamental Baptist that makes that very uncomfortable for me. I would say that it would definitely be difficult to sell a house that, if it has a reputation as being haunted, even if it was never haunted, right? It's got to make things, it's either going to be a draw for some people that are going to get excited about it, or it's going to be one of those things that is like, oh no, I don't want to get into that kind of situation. So I think it could be either a draw, or but it would probably make things difficult to do. Of course, you always have that house. I don't know, growing up, there's always that house, right, that everybody is sure must be haunted, right? When I was growing up, most of my time was spent at my grandmother's. We went there every single weekend. We lived there a couple of years, so it was mostly in this little town with my grandmother. And there was a house that we were sure, all of us kids were 100% sure that the woman who lived there was a witch, and not of the nice variety. Of course, how did those things get started, right? But then there was it was like an old mill. I believe it was an old mill, some kind of like old mill, or like a lumber mill or something along that line, and that was reputed as being haunted for sure by everybody in the town. And of course they capitalized on that by having haunted houses in it at Halloween. So that only, of course, makes it scarier to go through the haunted house, and it also just continues that reputation of the space of being haunted, right? The house I'm living in is built by people who sold it to me. I've met them and they're with us, which is relief from my last 2 houses. So it's been a better experience. That's good. Oh God, we had an old house. Sherry says that everyone called the witch's house in our neighborhood. Yes, that was the house we avoided. I know. You feel so bad for those people because what is the likelihood that those people are actually witches, right? I'm pretty sure it's just children making their lives miserable. I recall my daughter talking giggling one night in her room. When I walked in, I felt a spot of cold in front of her crib. When I asked her who it was, she said Ava or Grandma. Yeah, see, that's amazing, Anna Teresa. I do think that children, because that was the other question I think that we were talking about last week, is that, not necessarily everybody can see things like this, right? There are people who do have I really do believe it just has to do with the wiring of the brain, and some people simply have more receptors, or it's like a radio, have better antennas so they can pick up more stations on the radio. And children for sure, cats, animals, children can certainly see, I think, more clearly. Again, they're not, after time we're taught, we teach, or some people do, I did not, but some people teach children, no, that's not real, or you're not really seeing that, or that's make believe. And then over time they stop either seeing it or talking about it, right? So I definitely think that that is the case with ghosts and spirits and things of that nature. Hello, Miss Nikki. Miss Nikki made it. Mr. Soren. I think I already said something to you, Soren, but it just kind of dawned on me that Mr. Soren was in the house. It was nice to see you. Soren says, "Oh, I stayed in a haunted house for 20 years." Yeah, challenges because it was a creepy place. Yeah, exactly. Oh no, Miss Molly said we had one of those. I think that house is a witch house one. This older lady who would mow her lawn in an old timey black bathing suit, so the kids avoided her house. My grandson talks to family in spirit all the time. He's 5. Yeah, see, that's amazing, Patsy. I just, we talked about this. Claire says, one other Claire, we have 2 Claires. Other Claire says, I don't see or feel them. I don't know if I want. Yeah, some people don't, and I think that's fine. I don't think that I certainly, if I could not be able to, would I have done it at certain points in my life? I probably would have given up that ability as well, but it is what it is. But we talked a little bit about this with phase and Fae energy and things of that nature too in children, and this, this concept of the way that we do teach, in cultures where they don't think twice about the spirits of their ancestors or grandparents still being around. They don't, it's just part of the cultural understanding that yes, of course they're still around, and yes, of course we're going to put out offerings and food and things of that nature to our family members who have passed. I think that you have a lot more because it's conversation, right? People don't think about it. They aren't taught to not see it. It's just part of the cultural norm. I think that when you have cultures that are very repressive about or fearful of people that have passed on or about those types of things, then you certainly see a lot more of scary things or hear things about, because people are immediately scared and react in a fearful way, and we start to tell the scary, creepy stories. And then you, of course, have children kind of being taught not to be observant, to not see, or at least, again, to not speak about it because you're kind of taught not to do so. Patsy, so I'm losing track of this chat scrolling. If my dog is serious of some spot that's feeling above the bed, I just recite something out loud to please leave my home. There's nothing I can do for them, and they're not welcome. Go to light. Nikki, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you. I love this. Like, look, I can't help you. I have nothing I can do for you. Can you please exit? Please, the door and the window is this way. Can you please exit the room? Oh, I totally understand, Nikki. I'm laughing because we've all been there. Somebody said, who said, what is ghost after all this? I think we kind of covered that there's different, yeah, I mean, I think people have different theories. My theories about ghosts are, some are just recordings. They're just leftover recordings that have got stuck in the space that they're in, and so they get played out over and over again. It's not an actual spirit. I do think sometimes you have people that are stuck in between, especially for a little while after death, and they can be very confused. I certainly think that we have loved ones and people that come back to visit, or people with unfinished business that may be lingering around a little bit longer. Again, in the scope of this one, we're not talking about other kinds of energetic things. We're just talking about ghosts and spirits. And Nikki, who doesn't care what form it is, just does not want it in her apartment. Dita, I'm straight going into my mantra out loud. I'm okay with ghosts if they just leave me be. Although lights switching on and off and soapish bubbles, those things are cute and signs. But I don't need anybody hovering around my space. Nikki's like, just don't. Just don't. Exit to the left. I wish you much peace and much well, but not in my house. Oh, you need to just get I have one sister who's kind of similar to that. She moved into a space that had a lot of really negative energy. So of course, who does she call but me? She's like, you need to come take care of this. You need to come take care of this this situation. So there was much lining of the wall of Himalayan salt and things of that nature there to take care of it. So I know who you're going to call. In my family, you're going to call me. Or my niece, she bought a new house, and same thing. Can you come over and clear? Though she wasn't really looking for ghost clearing. It was more energy from the last people who had very bitter divorce situation that went on, and she just didn't want. She was newly getting married and didn't want to enter into the house with her new beautiful marriage in a space that had a lot of negative energy, and it was a lot of fun. A lot of Himalayan salt, a lot of Kelly's Mojo spray, and a lot of drum banging. Basically, what Kelly just said, recordings to play over and over again. The person is gone, but the character keeps playing out the role. Yeah. Something Judah said would freak her out, but I probably missed it. I'm always spraying him with sage, Sherry. Sherry thinks her brother has something negative, and so she's always spraying him. That's hilarious. Kelly, what do you think of mediums? Christina, I will say I don't want to say I don't think a whole lot about it. I don't work with mediums. I don't know a lot about mediums in general. I think that there are probably natural people that have the natural ability as a medium. If by medium you mean being able to see and contact and converse with people who have passed on, right? I think it's definitely an area in which we have to be careful, as with all things, right? That there's no way to prove things. We have to be careful because it's an area, I think, in which there can be charlatans, right? There can be there's a space. I think that my issue with some mediumship problems is that we are it's inhabiting a space which there are vulnerable people. And of course, this can be said with any kind of things, even tarot readings and things of that nature, right? If you're working in a space in which people are vulnerable, which I think that people who have had loved ones pass on is an extremely vulnerable space to be in. And that desire to contact the person that has passed on can be so strong, and the hope and the belief and the just want, the sheer will of want of that, I do think creates a vulnerability to being used. And so I think that that means that being very careful about who you work with, and understanding that person, getting to know that person is going to be really, really important. Of course, I think that's true in a lot of other cases, not just mediumship, but I think maybe because obviously I know those feelings that occur after you lose somebody that's so close to you. I think that it is so easy to want something so badly that you can get taken in. And so I think that a lot of caution needs to be there. So I don't disbelieve that there are valid, wonderful mediums who are there to help people. I just think that we have to be careful. Rachel, I agree with you, Kelly. There can be people who are not in integrity with this, which is true. Again, this is not just all mediums. This is not just mediums. There are psychiatrists who do not have integrity, that have vulnerable people in their care. There are doctors without integrity. There are pastors and priests that are without integrity, right? So I don't want to say that this is the same. This is just a problem for mediums, but I think it's a special problem in the case that you do have very desperate people who really want to contact somebody. And so, that can become very problematic. And yes, I agree, Tara student, that can go as well, as I said. So getting to know somebody's energy and who they are, and having that kind of taking that time to do so, I think is really important, just because of that degree of vulnerability. But again, I don't think it's just a medium problem. I think that there are many different areas in life in which there's vulnerability and an ability to misuse power that's going to happen. And so we all have to be very proactive, as individuals. We have to be proactive, and we have to make sure that we're setting up our own personal boundaries, and making sure that we're being proactive in connecting with the people that are going to be helpful to us. So Nikki does not mess with ghosts. I don't know. I think that I don't think, Nikki, necessarily that your approach to this is a bad approach, to say, I see you, I acknowledge you, but this is not the space for you. I wish you much peace, but please, find that peace outside of my personal space. Like, I don't think that that's necessarily handling it in a bad way. Holly, yes, Holly. Unfortunately, and again, in many different avenues of life, for sure. Okay, I'm trying to scroll up here. Have we done a past life chat? I think I'll have to look now. I'm starting to get not remembering. I don't know. I think we did a chat on reincarnation. I'm pretty sure we did. I feel like we did, but now I'm kind of blanking. If we didn't, we should. But I think we did. Al says, so what about asking for help? A no. In what context? I'm not sure, Al. And you may not be talking to me, so if so, I apologize. But but if you are asking me, maybe clarify that a little bit. I think we did Soren. Maybe Soren knows. I feel like we did, but I'll have to look it up. If we didn't, we will schedule it in. Or maybe is she talking about if asking help of people who passed on. I'm not sure. I'm sorry, Al. I'm missing the context. One night as I went to bed, I said, "This can't be true. I have spirits try to talk to me." Then in the middle of the night, I heard a young girl's voice. I thought we were real. It's interesting, Ginger. Isn't it interesting? Asking my dad for help with the house. Oh, Al is saying, is it wrong to ask them? Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's so hard sometimes to follow the lines of the chat. I would, okay, number one, I would never, on a broad topic such as this, there is nothing that I would say is right or wrong, right? I am not the I am not the person to arbitrarily say what is right or wrong for somebody else to do. It's not my job. It's not my place. I have definitely asked for ancestors' help, people who have passed on before, help in healing for my sister and things of that nature. I have definitely done so. But I am also, for me personally, I am also somebody who, say specifically with my son, I do try to allow that he is moving on and doing what he needs to be doing in the next life. And I don't want my grief or the things that I want to kind of be a tether in any way, shape, or form. That's a personal boundary for me, that my grief and my things that I have to work out are for me to work out, and not something to be like a hook or something into him moving on. So I kind of am always walking that balance of those types of questions. But I don't think right and wrong, I don't think plays into to anything that's up to me to say. I think figuring out what you're comfortable with as an individual. We always, it's our responsibility to figure out what we believe. What do we even believe about the afterlife? Because that's going to have an impact on how we might choose to interact with people who have passed on, is what we believe about that. So I think that finding that balance for self is part of the whole process here. And I would never stick this is the way to do it and never do this. I asked both sets of grandparents to help me find the right person for me, as I sucked at finding the right person. We need to acknowledge where we have flaws, right? 2 weeks of the day, my first ever boyfriend came back to my life. I'm married 12 years. Yeah. See, things like that to me is not, that to me is different, right? There's a different energy about kind of opening ourselves up for the need for help, because I do believe that our ancestors, which include everybody that has passed on behind us, right, including recent passings on, I do believe that opening ourselves up and asking for aid is a powerful experience with those who have passed on. So I don't have any kind of even personal issues with that. I think for me, it's because of with my son. So I think it depends on how recent. I think it depends on your feelings regarding it. So if you're having intense grief feelings, those are the kinds of things that I'm very careful, because I'm also still a mother, right? Whether or not my son is physically here on earth, I'm still his mother, and I still want what's best for him. And so making sure that those boundaries are kept in place is just part of continuing to be a mother. Whereas grandparents and things of that nature, yeah, exactly, like your parents, like I would be there in a heartbeat, right? So if it was the opposite and I passed on and I knew that Katie was opening herself up for help from me, I would be thrilled to do so. You know what I'm saying, Elle? So I think that's why I don't think there's any specific right or wrong. I think it is just knowing the situation and knowing what is healthy for you and the situation, and non-healthy for you or the situation, if that makes sense. I know this is Kelly's, but she's going to make me cry talking about that. Okay. I'm not sure what that means. I don't want to make you cry, so I'm not sure how to avoid it, because I'm not sure what the TT is. Living never would have asked out because I believe to see the bigger picture where they were. I trust them. It was done on Saints Day for lost things. Oh, when you talk, oh, I'm sorry. Well, we are. We're still mothers, right? Yes, and that's an amazing realization that comes, right? It's a strong realization to understand that. But the same thing goes with being still daughters, right? When we talk about Elle here, right? Elle is still his daughter. That is still her father, and so um, that role is powerful, and I can imagine that he would want to help. Um, I think when we look at like horror movies and things like that, where people are trying to contact people that have passed on, we're often obviously seeing, because the whole point of these things are to scare people, right? To have that scary experience. So we're seeing really negative, kind of clutching, grabby feelings about things, that there is this such strong internal need that you're clutching and grabbing at somebody that has passed on, or vice versa. So we're only seeing in those types of things very unhealthy, no boundaries, right? And so I think that, like, stepping back into where most of us are in a healthier space, it's a different situation. I think somebody asked if we had a question. I'm pretty sure did we talk about ancestors yet? See, I'm gonna have to make a list of which ones we've done. I'm gonna write it down and I will check. Anna Teresa said we did do the past lives, which doesn't mean we can't go back and approach them again. But I want to say we also talked about ancestors, but I will check it. I've written it down and I'll check and see, but I'm pretty sure we did have a topic about ancestors. That's the first thing I thought. You're your father's daughter. Yes, I know. And I definitely, I think for me, it comes to sort of opening up the lines for petitioning or asking for help versus it's all has to do with the approach, which makes sense. We did, but I'm all for digging in deeper to ancestors. I agree, Al. That's a conversation I think that is so deep, especially because I do think it actually intertwines also with concepts of past lives as well, which we kind of talked about. Now I'm remembering it better. Okay, so let's see. Oh, we are over time, aren't we? Because this is an interesting conversation. But let's pause for a minute here. I think we navigated this well. I think this went better than when we had a free-for-all of all the topics together in one. So next week we'll try to do one of the other topics. We talked about, we need to have one about kind of truly out-of-body experiences like astral projection and near-death experiences and things like that, because that was clumped into to last week's. There was something else that was clumped in. Yes, Soren, we're really enjoying it. We've been doing it for quite a while now. We've been doing the first hour as topic-driven, and then have some room for just rambly talking about stuff as well. So that way we get the best of both worlds, and I personally have greatly enjoyed it. Lucid dreaming, yeah, we talked about that some last week too. But again, it was such a jumble, and we just realized that we needed to break things down. So that's why this week we've kind of shrunk back down into just talking about ghosts and spirits, and then we'll start to hit on the other things as we move forward versus having them clumped together in the chaos that was last week's chat. I think we might have had definitely lucid dreaming. Lucid dreaming is we talked about lucid dreaming. We talked about astral projection. We talked about near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences. I think out-of-body experiences would encompass near-death experiences as well as like astral projection and things like that. Lucid dreaming, I think, is a different conversation. I know Nikki's like, okay, phew, She's like, I could handle that bit. Now let's move back to the random conversations. What I need to do is I'll go back through. Maybe what I'll do this is I'll go back through and make a list of the topics we've had with a link to them. And I'll make a page on my website with that, so that, and I can link it, have it automatically link in the live chat description boxes. That way, if you want to go back and find a conversation that we've had, you can find it. So let me make a note. So we'll just make like a topic index. That way we know what we've covered, number one, and we can go back and find it if we want. And there's no reason we can't go back and readdress them either, if we have more to say. Yesterday's Into the World was Crest was great, but it's definitely up for some lighter topic. I know it's hard when you can have condensed teaching, right? Because then you're like, okay, I need something to cleanse my brain palette. Okay. Let's pull a card for this week. As Miss Tarot Student has gotten us started a while back, we're using the Art of Life Tarot by Charlene Livingston. We've been using this since her suggestion. It's been a long time now to pick a card for the week. And so we're going to go ahead and get that pulled for this week. Last week's was interesting. It was the High Priestess after we deep dove into too many topics. And then we got the High Priestess like, whew, okay. We were diving it deep, right? I think it was I just pulled it out, but I'm pretty sure it was the High Priestess. Oh, apparently it's on sale, said Miss Nikki. All right, let's see what we have here. We have the Queen of Wands. Here we go. It is called Madame Hero. It's a German painting, and the quote is by Benjamin Disraeli, and it says, "The greatest good you can do for another is not just to share your riches, but to reveal to him his own." That's an interesting quote for the Queen of Wands, isn't it? Because the Queen of Wands is full of creativity and creative energy and all of that kind of thing. And it's one thing to give those to somebody, right? To say, here is all my creative energy. Here's my expression of creativity. I'm sorry, I have this tripod thing too close to me. I keep banging it. You know, here I'm gonna give you what I have created, but at the same time, the quote here is about the even stronger, because we think of queens as telling us to create an environment where that can grow in us, right? So the Queen of Wands is actually saying to you, make a space for yourself, for your creative energy to grow. Yes, the Queen of Wands herself is full of creativity, but her real goal here is to have the person find a space for their own creative expression. So that actually works really beautifully. Love it. Love it. So this week, again, this is our weekly card. Just think two things. Think about ways in which you need to set your own physical world, because for me, the queens are about asking us to set up our physical world in such a way that the energy of their suit can grow, so that we can all have think about ways in which we might need to make our physical space be an environment in which we can create, which we feel like creating, right? Versus you know, sometimes if we're not feeling very creative, we're kind of feeling blah. I keep looking over here because I'm looking at my creative space, which right now looks a little bit of a hot mess. And so sometimes it's a reminder to clean up your space, create a space that makes you want to be able to create. And so, so yeah, so I think that is a great a great thing. Ginger, have I missed the start of tarot class? No, tarot class is not till January. That will go up for registration at the 1st of December. So no, you've not. We definitely all read in our, I'm probably missing something, but we definitely all read in our own ways, thankfully, or it would be pretty boring if we didn't, right? Okay, I should put this stuff away, right? Oh, okay. So we have kind of, covered, not covered. I don't think we can, in an hour, and none of the topics that we pick are topics that we can cover in an hour, but we've talked about them and chewed over them, and it gives us food for thought, doesn't it? I know it's very hard it's hard sometimes to believe that Nikki doesn't speak English as her first language. Because she speaks very good English. I certainly could not converse in her mother tongue in any way, that shape, or form that anybody could understand. My hairs are getting in a nice length. They're getting there. I'm almost to the point, we talked about this last week. I'm almost to the point where I need to cut this into like a little bob because I don't want a mullet. But I'm kind of enjoying having some length, so it's hard for me. I think I want to let this get just a little bit longer. I think maybe once this gets like under my ear, then I'll kind of do like a wedge in the back, like a little bob, and then let the whole thing grow. I know there are very few of you who care one way or another about how I'm growing my hair out, but it is that middle length that's just kind of driving me nuts. So I'd mess with it a lot. Two Rocks wants me to have a mullet for giggles. No, I'm not doing the mullet. Tara Student says, I just got the Illuminator. Oh, I love that deck so much, Tara Student. But I'm considering edging it. Have you edged yours? Yes, I did. Now, this is a deck that I use a lot, and you can tell it from my edging. It's definitely worn. I edged it in a matte gold. It was a Tombow, and I'll probably have to refresh it because it's definitely starting to wear. But again, I use this deck constantly, so it gets riffle shuffled a lot, and that's going to happen. The cards themselves look brand spanking new. It's just the sides because I use it so much. So it was I think it was a Tombow that I used, and it was just in a matte gold color. Either here or in Dr. Jackson Crawford mentioned that English is actually close to Scandinavian languages, so you guys learn it easily. Yeah, that's true. I mean, they all came from the same source. I know, Molly. I heard that. Molly, actually, my friend Patrick had messaged me and said that because the one thing that I was not happy about with the Super Oracle was the cardstock, because the cardstock of the Pagan Otherworlds is this amazing linen cardstock. And so, to be honest, I just assumed that the Super was going to be the same, and it wasn't. It was a very smooth, it just kind of wanders all over the place. I'm not saying it's bad cardstock, but it was not the same cardstock. And apparently they're putting it out in the second edition back with the linen cardstock. I'm probably not going to rebuy it unless I can sell the other ones. But it definitely was like, oh, I wish it was just like that from the beginning. I know. I totally understand. I felt the same way when I heard it. It was kind of like, oh no. We'll see what happens. But yes, like Soren says, if you look at, so if you even think about the Elder Futhark runes, that's a Proto-Germanic language alphabet. And so from out of that Proto-Germanic came, Old Norse, Old English, Germanic, Scandinavian, Icelandic, like those all came from the same source. And so you definitely can see those carryovers, of course, despite the fact that they are different languages now, but they came from that same source. So it makes a lot of sense. Does not help me to speak German. I feel like with my blood and all that kind of stuff, I should just be able to speak it from my bones, but yeah, doesn't quite work that way. Nikki says she kind of grew up with it, plus fluent German, Nana's family side, and living near the German border. Al says, when I was in Germany, I felt like I was this close to being able to understand the conversation around me. I didn't realize how close English and German are. Okay, scrolling up here in case I missed anything. Oh, I missed Nikki saying that she had neighborhood kids around her from the UK. That helped that they were around her when she was younger, for sure. Sorry, I'm not. I can see where I can see in the thing that I'm getting lower and lower. Oh, thank you, Ty. Nobody was really thinking I have great hair. I know that probably seemed weird if somebody hasn't been around for a while. My hair was very, very short. Bob, not Bob, pixie. So I'm trying to grow it out from that. That's why if anybody at all is interested, the very few people that are interested in my hair is because I'm trying to grow it out, and it's going to drive me crazy. I wish we could buy the Antique Anatomy book separately for those of us. Oh, so you have the indie book deck, but you didn't get the book? Is that what it is? The book doesn't come with it, Molly? I do too, to some degree. Like I look back on some of the videos where it was first cut off super short. I kind of feel like it would either need to remain super short or long. Like I don't really like the somewhat grown out pixie. I liked it when it, and I, if you, cause I know you were here at the time, I cried forever, but, I really, looking back at it, I liked the short pixie, really short pixie versus a kind of grown out pixie. I don't know. I'm going to grow it out for a while. At some point I might get like chop it all off again. Who knows? My hair grows fairly fast. Soren says that he grew up in Sweden and Denmark, and many shows were subtitled. See, that makes sense too, rather than dubbed into my language. So I learned English that way, apart from classes, and then eventually moving abroad to the US. That makes a lot of sense, Soren, that if you're watching subtitles, that is going to, but hearing, even if you were watching subtitles in your own language, but you're hearing the person say the English language, then I could see where that would really help children to be able to pick up languages, or as you grow up and you're watching those subtitles but hearing the English word, you're bound to pick things up. Miss Molly says the AA indie deck came without, okay, no guidebook or little white book, but the mass market deck set comes with a guidebook written for the mass market edition. Are there different cards in the mass market than the indie version, or is it the same cards? I looked at the mass market version at Barnes and Nobles, and it was terrible cardstock, like really thin cardstock. The rest of the packaging looked great though. Nikki says, I love that Lady Night of Avalon. To me, English always sounded more poetic, and all the music I listened to is English. That's true. Also thinking about songs, right? So songs are such, you're getting songs from all over the world. So I'm sure that in, where Nikki growing up, she's listening to English music as well. So that also, it's so interesting to see that. I think they're talking about the Antique Anatomy deck that was not too long ago released as mass market. It used to be an indie deck. I wonder if it is as bad as Terror of Transformation, where the Avalon described as tissue paper. Oof, it's pretty bad. I'm not super picky about cardstock. I actually like you know me, I like mass market, a lot of mass market cardstock because I do riffle shuffle. So I would say I'm fairly unpicky about cardstock, and it was very thin. Like I think it's that kind where you would be concerned that you might bend it, like put a bend in the cardstock because it just doesn't feel like it's going to hold up. I know, that's what I'm saying. That's an extreme, even though because I do actually like US game cardstock. I like Los Scarabeo cardstock, but oh, so yeah, Whale Song says that the cardstock is very thin, but that she shuffles the hell out of this deck. Riffle Bridge Overhand, it hasn't bent or chipped or folded, so that's good. So she said it is holding up well. See, that's kind of stuff you won't know, right, until it's used, so that's good to know. Al says there's a lot of negative. It's not a deck that I was looking to get, so I haven't really looked up on it. I just happened to, there was one open in Barnes and Noble, so I was able to see it. I think the coloration, Molly says she thinks the coloration might be a bit different from any mass market, maybe more vibrant, but the cardstock turns me off. I'm not even, yeah, I would say, I know, Molly, you're not super picky about that either. And I don't mean picky in a bad way. Like, it's okay for people to want good cardstock, but some people, like myself, don't actually like thick cardstock. So while thick cardstock is really beautiful, and I love the feel of it, in practice of actually using it, I'm not a big fan of. Like the first edition Wild Unknown hurt my hands to shuffle because of the way that I shuffle. And so even though it's absolutely beautiful cardstock, I prefer the second edition that I can riffle better. So it's not that, I think we tend to, especially me as a reviewer, of course, reviews tend to be like, oh my gosh, I absolutely love this cardstock. It's thick and it's beautiful, or it's thin and it's this and this. But it's really going to be dependent on how you shuffle and what you do with it, whether or not you're going to love a particular cardstock or not. It's such a personal preference. So I don't think that somebody who loves thick cardstock is picky. It's just that that's what they love. I like all of it. I just don't like super thick cardstock that I can't bend. Molly says there's nothing wrong with having preference. I like luxe cardstock, but that can be too much for me at times. I know, it's finding that just right. So far, my current just right cardstock has been the Majestic Earth. It's so thin and beautifully matte, but not sticky matte. And it's thin and it riffle shuffles like a dream, that I'm really loving it. It may be slightly too thin in that if I leave it spread out for a while, of course, it's also my register heat is also on now. It can kind of start to bow a little bit if the cards are just sitting out individually for a while, but they go right back into shape really well. So far, my just right is right this moment. My just right is a Majestic Earth. Isabella recently said that we sound like barking dogs. Oh no, who sounds like barking dogs? I'm not sure what we're talking about there. There is a video somewhere where I don't know how they do this, but they sort of approximate what people sound like in different languages, but they don't actually say anything. Like they're not, I don't think they're actually speaking sentences and stuff, but they do, I don't know how to describe this, but there's some kind of video that I watched a long time ago. If I can find it, I'll link it. But where they're just kind of giving you this idea of what it's the cadence and the staccato-ness and stuff like that, what that sounds like in different languages versus actually they're not trying to just speak the language. They're like doing something where you can really see the differences. Anyways, it's pretty funny. Claire, I don't want to know what the lady says about Dutch speakers. Or that people will say that German people sound like really angry, which I don't necessarily hear. And I think probably comes from a lot of movies about like Hitler and those types of things. And so that, you know, it's more like military bearing and military speech, where, because I've heard people speaking German in ways that I find to be really beautiful. So I think that it depends on what you grew up seeing, right, or hearing. I heard people say that Swedish speakers sound like we're singing when we speak, and Danish speakers often get the throat disease, or that we have potatoes in my mouth. Oh no. And I don't know, Molly was not trying to be dirty, but said something dirty, and I totally missed it. Oh. Yeah, size is more important than thickness in cardstock. In cardstock. I see, I missed that. A tarot student says, well, German is not very melodic, and I say that as a German. Yeah, I would definitely not say that it's melodic, but I do think that people make it out to be harsher than maybe it is. I don't know. I guess I think of Annika, who Kofin has she has a YouTube channel as well, and she's German, and I've heard her speak German and sing in German, and I think she sounds beautiful with it. So I don't think it's necessarily harsh, but I think it just depends. Chinese speakers apparently think English speakers sound like ducks. That does not surprise me. And yes, then we're talking about dialect, because that's the other thing, right? Even when you're talking about English, there's so many different dialects in England, in the English speaking world in Europe. But then even when you get to the United States, American English is spoken very differently and has harsher sounds, softer sounds, smoother sounds, more staccato-y sounds, depending on the region that you're at and the accent that you have. So, you know, it's just amazing. Language is really amazing. And I'm sure that's the case in Germany and other places as well. I don't know this as much, but I'm guessing even in Sweden, there are probably areas that have a different dialect and are going to sound a little bit different. Time says sometimes thin cardstock card is plastic. Oops, I lost it. Plastic coated and lasts well. Yep, sometimes it does. Sometimes it's bad cardstock. Holly says, I riffle shuffle playing cards all the time, but never riffle shuffle to. I know, Miss Holly. I've gotten many messages about the disrespect of my riffle shuffling of my tarot and oracle cards. My cards don't mind it. They don't care one way or another. My hammer doesn't care how I hold it, and my decks don't care how I shuffle them. My gilding on the edges of my cards might not like it, but it's okay. We've come to an agreement. English also use lots of German words. Well, yes, because again, English is a bit of a melting pot, right? It picks up a lot of different languages, which makes it hard to learn because it's got a blending of different languages. Una, she riffle shuffles everything. Yeah, I know. But it surprises me at how many people take offense at it, because I don't know how you can be offended for my tarot decks, but whatever, it'll be okay. I promise. This is what I usually say. I promise I will never go to somebody's house and pick up one of their decks and riffle shuffle their deck. So, I never will be that secret person who sneaks into people's houses and riffle shuffle their decks. I only riffle shuffle my own. English has more yes, it is very difficult. It's even harder to teach children grammatical rules in English. I've done it to both my kids, and it's very frustrating, right? When you say, okay, this is the rule XYZ, but then except for da 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 da, it makes it very confusing. Hello, Mr. Chris. He says I can sneak into his house and shuffle his cards anytime. Thank you, Mr. Chris. So don't call the police if there's a strange woman in you wake up in the middle of the night, there's a strange woman in your living room shuffling your deck. Dude says, I learned how to riffle shuffle with the Wild Unknown, which was, oh, wow. Yeah, that is thick. I bet you look like a pro with normal playing cards, Judah. I really prefer, and I did riffle shuffle, and it did break in the first edition, Wild Unknown, but I do prefer the second edition. It's just a little bit thinner, and it still feels really good, but it's just slightly thinner, and it riffles a little bit easier. Chris is going to get some sage after me. I do both, Al. Al says I always riffle shuffle, but I do both. I usually try to get a couple riffles in just for the good mix, and then I do a lot of overhanding, so I do both. I was born in Montreal. The French is very different from Parisian French. That makes sense. It's probably taken on a difference there. I would assume that to be the case in other, where you have immigrations from one country to another, where, like the Spanish of Spain is going to sound very different than the Spanish of Mexico, right? Because there's been a whole, process of pulling in and shifting and changing over time from those places. So that makes sense. She says, I dated a Chilean once who would point out ugly Spanish, but it all sounded the same. Yes. I still have trouble shuffling the luminate, so sorry. Yeah, I saw that. Okay. Flamboyant Clairvoyant says, I just love saying their name. I say Quebecois. I don't know how you say that correctly. Quebecois French is like Australian English. Anna Teresa says, I am in Ottawa, but my mother learned Parisian French. So when I started school, I had a little trouble in French. And then again, that is my third language. I'm so impressed with people that have Quebecois. Oh, dear. People are trying. Quebecois. So you, Quebecois? See, now we got two different people saying two different ways here. This is my struggle. This is my struggle. Quebec. Oh, so you say Quebec. You don't say Qua. You don't say Quebec. See, I've been to Quebec. So it looks to me like Queen, Qua. So I say Quebec, which is apparently wrong. I think maybe it's Quebec and then Wa, Quebecois. Quebecois. Ah, there we go. It's just a hint of the K in the second syllable. Quebecois. So is Quebecois the language then of Quebec? Would that be saying that correctly? Quebecois is the language of Quebec, which I thought was French. But I guess Quebecois would be a variation of French, perhaps? See, we learned something. We don't just learn about ghosts here on the Truth and Story live chats. We also learn language. No, la française es la langue de Quebec, which I cannot speak French. That's what I thought, because I've been to Quebec. I'm going to try to say Quebec instead of Quebec. And I've seen, all the signs are in French and that kind of thing. Claire says no. I don't know what Claire is saying no. I don't know what Zoran's saying no about. No, there will be no language classes from Kelly. Chris says Kelly's French class starts next week, then German. No. If I teach anybody to speak a language, it would be hilarious. It would have to be a comedy class is what it would have to be. We'll give that. We'll let Soren do that. Lady Knight says, after spending a year in America, I really did. Why did that just bring up the, there's a movie, is it Mouse Tales? No, it's not Mouse Tales. There are no cats in America, and the streets are paved with gold. There are no cats in America. Something is an American Tale. We talked about this before. Yes, for some reason, that just spending a year in America made me think of that song. Why? I don't have any clue, but that's the way my brain works. After spending a year in America, I really did forget a handful of German words and also spell things wrong when you got back to Germany. And you were born and raised in Germany, Lady Knight. That is so interesting. Christina, we can learn together. That would definitely not be, that would definitely, I'm not sure how well we would achieve that, but we could try. Very harsh compared to Parisian. My Uncle Roger spoke Quebecois. Very hard for me to understand. My father spoke Parisian French and we lived in New Caledonia. I think New Caledonia sounds amazing. Doesn't Caledonia sound like a place in which, I don't know, it sounds like something really old. I'm not talking about even like Middle Ages, but really old. Caledonia just sounds amazing. I don't know why I like that word. Anyways, I'm German, but English is often easier to me than German, especially when I'm tired or angry. You would think it would be the other way around. Like you would slip back into German more when you're tired and angry. So that's interesting. I lose ability to speak clear sentences when I'm tired or angry. Time says, born in Germany, grown up in Austria. Oh, that must be interesting. You know, that reminds me of, oh my gosh, Brian, who's on YouTube. He has a tarot channel on YouTube, and he has the most interesting accent. And now I can't remember which one he said. It's like Scottish and something else. Like he's got this mix of accents that all combined together just makes a fantastically interesting accent. And I am guessing that a German Australian mix must be an interesting accent. Molly has trouble with retention and recall, so I'm always having to relearn everything I already know. Yes. Fun. My son had that problem too. But I will always love listening to Spanish and being able to understand small bits. Anyways. We need to do a card reading for the end here. What are we going to use? Let's just use this because it's right here. And it's a old favorite. I know, I think a lot of people have problems with languages. My understanding is that the younger that you learn languages, the more elastic. Somebody said their brain is plastic. But I think your brain's more elastic and you can learn a lot more languages and more easily. That doesn't mean you can't as an adult. I think you just have to go over it more times. Like the repetition probably has to be a lot higher. And I think as if everything, there are some people who are just better at it than others, right? They have a natural propensity to be able to learn languages. I would like to know if anybody's ever done a study as to whether or not, now we're just getting into randomness because it's the end of 2 hours of chatting. But I wonder if anybody's ever done a study if you would have, because this goes into genetic memory, right? Which needs to, when we do another ancestor talk, we also need to talk about like genetic memory and things like that. Like, is there any person who's done a study on whether if you are learning a language that is part of your blood heritage, whether or not that is easier to learn than somebody who is learning something completely different than anything to do with their heritage? Wouldn't that be interesting if it was? And I don't know how you could possibly test for that, but wouldn't it be interesting if it was easier to learn a language that was part of your own heritage? Because then that does bring up those kinds of things like genetic memory and stuff like that, which is just random thoughts at the end of 2 hours of chatting, right? And that's true too, Nikki. That makes a lot of sense, Miss Nikki, because the different languages do use the muscles and things differently. And I would assume even those muscles are more fluid when you're a child than once you're an adult and it's really gotten into a specific way of using those muscles. So that makes sense that that would also be a factor as well. Soren says, so there's physical things as well going on as well as mental, just memory in the mind. It's being able to actually physically do that. So isn't it so fascinating? It is, all of it's fascinating. And I definitely agree with Soren. And this goes with everything. The easiest language, the easiest instrument, the easiest whatever it might be, fill in the blank. Divination system. The easiest thing is what you're interested in because you are going to put the time into it. And most things that you're learning, whatever it's going to be, it just requires time. If you're not going to invest the time, however amount of time you're going to invest is however much you're going to get out of it, right? So that makes very much sense, Mr. Soren. Studies have shown that after a very early age, you also have a difficult time even hearing certain sounds, phonemes, and differentiating between them. That is interesting as well, flamboyant, clairvoyant. And again, I just love saying their name. I'm just going to say flamboyant, clairvoyant like 5 times. That is interesting because then your hearing trained more towards different sounds. And if a particular language doesn't carry those sounds, how apt are we or how clear are we to hear those? The human body is fascinating. She's I can say, you'd be like, please stop saying my name. You are banned from saying my name. Elle says, I lived in the Middle East for a year. It was hard for me to hear the subtleties of Arabic. And especially if there's people that, languages that are very, very quick. And sometimes that's dialect too, though, because in the United States, there are areas in which people talk really, really quick and it's really staccato and da, 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 da. And then you might go into the South more where they're kind of have that thought. Not all of them. You're going to have people who are Southern who speak really quick, but there are areas in the South where when you go to try to talk to, I remember going somewhere and I was a teenager and we were just trying to place an order at a fast food restaurant, and the area there, everybody spoke so slow that it was almost hard to understand because the drawling and the slowness of it. So, even amongst our regular languages, how, our own language, such as American English, is going to be very, very different depending on the area. And then, of course, you get personality in there. People that talk really perky all the time and people that slow down and are really slow. It's just, people are fascinating. I love listening to music sung in different languages. I look up the lyrics when it's available so I have an idea of what's being said, but I love the emotion. Yes, because then you really do rely just on the sounds and the feelings. I like to listen to music of different languages when I'm doing other things that I don't want to be distracted by English language, because I do tend to listen to lyrics. I know some people say, I don't care about the lyrics, I'm really just listening to the song, but I do listen to lyrics. And so if I'm trying to do something that needs my concentration, I don't like listening to English language because I'm trying to listen to the lyric versus what I'm doing. Yes, Elle, I know, it's so amazing. Definitely so amazing. But the chanting out of the Elder Futhark just, well, A, it's giving you chills because they're power words, but B, just hearing it is just amazing. Oh. English doesn't have that much words from German. It's just Germanic. It's just kind of etymology. Percentage-wise, Bart is saying, percentage-wise, most words in English come from French and Latin. There we go. That makes sense. Because there's a lot of interchange between France and England and things probably when pulling those words in. So that makes sense. I will take that. Mr. Chris, hello. I love how the same words have different meanings in different languages and shows the power of words comes from the emotions and feelings we put into them. Yeah, that is. So I think what Chris is saying is when you have the same word, but it actually means something very different in different. So the sound of the word is there, but it has different meanings in different languages. So there's something about that sound that's important, but it has different connotations put to it. What would be also interesting is words, well, but they would probably just be crossover words. Like it would be interesting if a word, especially words that are words that sound like, so onomatopoeia, where a word sounds like what it is. It would be interesting if those words would show up in various other languages, but not because it was picked up from that language. I don't know how you'd be able to tell that. It would have to be older language that was more separated from crossover, because it would be interesting to see if there are actual words that are the same, that mean relatively the same thing, but it wasn't that they were picked up by the different languages. I think that would probably be very hard to know, unless, again, they were really old. I love the weirdness of German words like I cannot say that. I don't think other languages have translations for this one. Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude is what it looks like to me. It looks like Schadenfreude, but she doesn't think that there are a one-to-one translation for that. Don't know. I have listened to one English opera. I've seen quite a few English ones. I did not like the sound of it, not melodic. Opera is better in Italian, French, German, and even Czech. Molly says depends on what kind of music. It depends, what you can listen to. Japanese has lots of onomatopoeias for words. Tosca in English is just so silly. I don't know what that means. We have Liedvermaak for that word, says Nikki. Schadenfreude, which means to have joy in someone else's misery. Tells you what kind of people we are, Tara. I wasn't going to say that, Tara students. That you have a specific word about having joy in other people's misery. I feel like we must have a word for that. It's not jumping straight to my head. First thing I'm thinking of is a Scrooge, because Scrooge McDuck certainly had joy in other people's misery, but a Scrooge would be more somebody who is greedy, is how we would do that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we have a specific word, just like one word that means that. And Nikki says they have one too. Entertainment on the cost of someone else's suffering. We definitely have the action of it. Yes, reality TV, says Molly, or watching people like fall and laughing at them. So we definitely have the action. I just don't know that we have a specific word. Scott, oh my goodness, Soren. See, this is my point, Soren. So if I have so much of my genetic code is Swedish, right? I feel like I should be able to look at that word and just be able to say it, and Soren say, oh my gosh, Kelly, you can really tell that you're Swedish heritage. But no, I look at that word, Skadagladja, maybe the J is a yeah. I have no clue. Sadism, yeah, but I think that definitely is very specific to sexuality, not to just watching somebody trip and finding it funny. Yeah, I think that's definitely it's a darker connotation of the same type of idea, right? Chris says we have a song for Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude has, am I even saying Schadenfreude anywhere close to it? Somebody tell me. It has nothing sexual built into it. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You know, we watch all of those YouTube videos where people are falling or doing stupid things and we just crack up. over it. Yeah, I really can't think of a specific English word that means that, but we definitely enjoy that. You can tell from YouTube how popular the fail videos are. Like when I'm really sick or really tired, Schadenfreude, maybe. But like bloopers where people mess up, or the fail army videos where people are doing all kinds of stupid things and or just like falling and doing things like missing entirely what they're trying to do, and it cracks us up. Schadenfreude. Something like that. Bart's gonna tell me I'm way off. Schadenfreude. Oh, here's the definition. It's in our English dictionary. So does that mean that it's now an English word? We've grabbed onto it. Schadenfreude means pleasure, enjoyment obtained from the troubles of others. Yeah, it's in our dictionary. We probably brought it over to Pennsylvania with all the Germans and Dutch. Can I just say, Soren, that you do an excellent job of spelling it out so that at least it makes sense to try to say it? Oh, is there a D in there? Schadenfreude. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. You should be a language teacher. It is pronounced like Sigmund Freud's last name. Oh, without the Freud. Can I call Sigmund Freud? I'm sure he wouldn't appreciate that either. Again, this is why no, there will never be any classes for me on how languages. Clearly, I am terrible at pronouncing other people's languages. Molly says, is that how you pronounce it, Soren? I've been so mispronouncing it for a very long time. Well, now we know. Now somebody else is going to come and say, no, we don't say it that way, but I'm going to stick with Schadenfreude. Because at least it feels like I'm saying it correctly. That's the way I've heard it, but here in America, so we might be butchering it. I'm sure that we are. I'm sure that we are, Al. I think we can relatively assume that we're butchering it. I think we take butchering other languages an art form, unfortunately. Oh, Freude. Don't forget the D. Sorry. He did say he forgot the D. Schadenfreude. You are Sigmund Freud. That's what I'm going to start calling him now, Chris. Sigmund Freud. And he will come back and haunt me. Then he's going to come back and haunt me, because we can bring this right back around to ghosts, where Sigmund Freud is going to come and haunt me for butchering his last name. Oh my goodness. That's very good. That's all thanks to Soren. Like I said, he did a really good job explaining, or some people aren't as good as writing it out phonetically like that. I feel like that was very good. Schadenfreude. I'm going to use that all the time now, because I know a lot of people who do somebody trips and you're like all cracking up and you're like, oh my goodness, you are such a Schadenfreude in person. A Schadenfreudian person. He will probably haunt me to analyze why I slaughter things. I think that there's a lot of people out in YouTube world who try to analyze why I slaughter things. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm going to pull cards here because these things have been shuffled to death. I'm pulling from the Angels and Ancestors Oracle cards. Oh, I know. I figured that, Lady Knight, when I was saying it. You wouldn't say you are a Schadenfreude would be wrong. Schadenfreude is a feeling you feel when someone trips. So I would say, you crazy person, you're just feeling Schadenfreude. And they would say, yes, I am. Schadenfreude. Oh, that's even hard put out there, Soren. Schadenfreude. I wonder if the D and the ya are together, kind of, or if it's Scadaglidia. Like, is it separated out or is it ja? I can't either, Anna Teresa. In dictionaries, somebody is yelling as they're walking down the street. In dictionaries, when they say how to pronounce things, I don't find those very helpful. Soren was saying that means something similar to Schadenfreude. That the Scadaglidia means something similar to the Schadenfreude. Oh my gosh. I am Schadenfreude, you would say. Meaning I am feeling the laughter at this person's demise or tripping and things. I know Isabel's not happy with people are talking outside. Judah says there are websites where you can write down how something is phonetically and a voice will pronounce it for you. Oh, that's nice. Of course, they probably say it wrong. Hello, Susanna. I am from Spain, a super fan. Oh, super fan. That's awesome. But it's nice to meet you and try to learn more English to understand more of this. You pronounce bandito and sombrero very, very with the Santa Muerta tarot, meaning I say it wrong. It wouldn't surprise me if I just bandito and sombrero, I'm probably saying incorrectly is maybe what you're trying to say. It wouldn't surprise me. This is the point of this last 15 minutes is that I definitely do not do a very good job with pronunciation, even my own language. Schadenfreude, but it doesn't. But it doesn't matter. It still means the same thing, right, Time? It still means we're laughing at somebody else when they trips, which is not good. I do. I feel like that is, Jamie, I feel like that helps, right? If I slaughter English as well. It's not personal. I like to say, truthfully, I do think that I like to say that it's creative pronunciation. And number two, I think there is a big difference between somebody has learned words from reading versus learning them from hearing. So if you grew up reading a lot in kind of isolation, as I did, I think that you get in your head because you're reading it and you're young, maybe too young to be reading it. You don't know the word. You just assign something to it as you're reading it, and it really gets locked into your brain so that even down the road when you know you're not saying it correctly, it's kind of locked in. That's those are my excuses. Yes, exactly, Jamie. And I do think that plays a part in it. Now, obviously, we all need to be doing our best to try to figure things out. But the funny thing is that when I mispronounce things, I will have 5 people tell me how to pronounce it correctly, and they will be all different. So then it's like, wow, or you can go find a bunch of different websites that say things differently. So I have certain videos where, yeah, people just say, no, you're wrong, it's this. No, you're wrong, it's that. No, you're wrong, it's this. And they're different pronunciations. It's like, well, nobody can really agree on how it's pronounced. So maybe I'm not entirely wrong. Chris says, my first instinct is to spell color and gray the British way because I read Narnia so many times when I was young. Yeah, for sure. I know Nikki's trying to give me the subtle push to pull those cards and quit shuffling them. Nikki loves me anyways. Arrow, Air Guardian, and the Moon. Okay, let me put these. I love this one of spring. This is not one of our cards, but I do love that particular one. Okay. So the cards that we have here are Arrow. Now this is one of the cards in this deck, and we're going to pause for a moment, that has always kind of interested me, because you think about the card for Arrow, right? Or I think about Arrow, and I think like that straight shot, that clarity that is cutting through. The deck that we're looking at is the Angels and Ancestors Oracle cards. But this is actually, in this deck, the Arrow card is about surrounding yourself with setting up protections. So almost like you're setting up the archer towers so that they are ready to be able to shoot down at anything that's coming around. So it's less of a shield protection where you're maybe setting up a wall barrier, and much more of setting up that sort of alert protection is how I kind of see this card, because I've always thought this was an interesting one, and yet it comes up in ways for protection that really works in readings, even though I would personally use Arrow as more of the motion and that straight shot and that sense of clarity going through. I actually do have come to appreciate this being a little bit different than how I would normally would work with Arrow. And so I quite like this, because for me, it's like setting up active protection. It's not passive protection that you're just hiding behind a wall, or you're just, setting something into place and forgetting about it. It's about being actively setting up your boundaries and your protection. So I quite love that. Then we have the Air Guardian, which is about shifting your perceptions. It's got a little bit of a hanged man feel to it, a little bit of this idea of changing the way that you think about a situation. So I think it's interesting, because the first step is set up some active boundaries, right? So as we're moving into this coming week, all of us together, thinking about ways in which you need to actively have good boundaries in place. We all need to be doing so. It's important to be smart about our boundaries. It doesn't mean we have to be all walled in against many, many shells and layers, but we do need to have some degree of keeping our boundaries in place in the way that we're interacting with other people, the way that we're interacting with energy around us. We just need to be actively doing that. But then when we do that, when we've set up good and healthy active boundaries, when we do that, this leaves us the space and the energy to be able to then shift into different ways of seeing the world, because we kind of know, all right, I've set things into place, I've got my boundaries set up, and now I'm going to make a shift into a new way of thinking that's going to have us diving deep. And that's the importance of the boundaries, is because setting those into place gets us into the space where we can dive deep and hear the intuitive messages. But it takes a shift in perception. It takes us paying attention to the world around us. It takes us paying attention to dreams. It takes us paying attention to signs when a flock of bird goes off, or something that triggers our instinct, because we're looking at the world, we're seeing the world in fresh ways, so that we can pick up on the intuitive messages that are around us. But first, set up those safe boundaries. First, make sure that you're actively having protection around yourself, so that you can kind of relax and open yourself up to the messages that are around you. So this could be an indication that there are some messages on the wind for us over the coming week. And the way to work with that is to be open to those messages, but setting up being smart about being, you don't want to be so open that you're getting messages and input that's really going to drain you. You want to be being smart about that. So I think that's interesting little message there. I love this deck, as you know. I don't generally get decks that have angels in them, but I think this is really well done. I think it's very well done in its balance of masculine and feminine. I think it's really well done in the way that it approaches all different cultures. I actually think it's just a really well done deck. So I have gotten much use out of it, and I appreciate it as a tool. Kelly, it may be that Adur says, it may be that you hear different pronunciations of a foreign word, but for speakers of that language, they sound the same. Let me think here. For example, for a Spanish ear, will and wheel sound the same because there's no distinction between the short and long vowels in Spanish. That makes sense. And we were talking about that a little bit earlier, where some of the problem is that there are just sounds that aren't used in certain languages. So mouths don't get used to making them, and also ears don't get used to hearing them. So that makes sense. That makes sense, Adore. The problem is that I have a thick American accent. I don't know if I have a thick American accent. I've been told that I don't have a thick American accent. I grew up in the Midwest, but I had a speech impediment when I was little. So when I was in grade school, I had a speech impediment and I sounded like I was from Boston. Now, my grandfather had a very, he loved it because he was actually from Boston, and my heritage from Ireland went from Ireland to Boston. And so my great great grandparents from Ireland, died in Boston, and their kids were raised in Boston. And so it was kind of funny that I had a thick Boston accent, even though it was just because I had a speech impediment. And so I had to go to class to fix it, or go to language things to fix it. I kind of wish they hadn't fixed it, because I would have loved to have still had a Boston accent. But I wonder if that also changes the way that I sound, because I've had people tell me that I don't have a thick American accent, but I don't know what a thick American accent would sound like, because obviously they all sound American, right? Judah says, in Portuguese, we have no idea what's the difference between beach and bitch. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. That makes sense, Judah. And that could get quite embarrassing for sure. When speaking another language, that's when your accent starts to show up, which again makes sense. And I don't speak another language, so maybe that's why my thick American accent isn't there, because I don't speak anything else, right? Nikki wants to know how to get the symbols to switch. Yes, you can, as Soren says, you can have different keyboards installed onto your laptop or onto your keyboard so that you can switch between them. Oh, what an interesting chat, folks. Again, I so appreciate everybody being willing to come and have a chit chat, covering ghosts and spirits and language and riffle shuffling versus overhand shuffling, without anybody getting in any fights over it, right? We enjoy the conversation. It's always something that I look forward to, and so I appreciate you showing up and spending some time with me this Sunday afternoon. So I hope that the rest of your Sunday, whatever that might be for you, is relaxing. And I am going to go make some dinner and get some more work done. And it was a joy to see you guys all. I will try to, I've written it down. I do think it'd be a nice idea to have a topic index for these. So I'll try to get that done before next week and put it in the description bar next week. And that way, we are able to kind of see what topics we've already talked about and have an index for them. Lady Knight says riffle is a pet peeve. Some people say rifle and some people say riffle. Yeah, I think I used to say rifle, actually. I believe I said rifle a couple years ago when I first started my channel. I think somebody was like, it's not rifle, it's riffle. So I think somebody actually changed the way that I said that. So I can understand that if you're a non-English person, that would be very confusing, because the way that it's spelled would make it riffle, whereas rifle is a gun. Yes. It was good to see you too, Soren. I much appreciated your help. Hello, Kendra, and goodbye. So long, farewell. I'll be just saying. I'll be off. I see. Now I'm going to be so. Now I'm going to be feel like I'm slaughtering that. I'll be just saying goodbye. I would interchange. Well, I think that Soren. I think I said rifle, and then somebody said it's not rifle, it's riffle. But because I had said rifle for so long, it's really hard to change a word once you're used to saying it wrong. So then I was saying both of them. Now I feel like I pretty much always say riffle. I feel like I've been fully converted to the riffle versus a rifle. Unless I'm very tired, perhaps I might slip back. But yes, for a while I interchanged them because I was so used to saying rifle. But I believe the appropriate way is rifle is a gun and riffle is a shuffle. But I'm sure, I am sure that somebody is going to message me and say, no, it's really pronounced rifle, just to confuse me. So goodbye. I'm leaving. Have an absolutely wonderful rest of your days.